Okay, ready to go. So if I can invite my fellow panelists to join me on stage. Juanita Concha Rivera, Director General of Regional Transport Authority of Cali, Colombia. Felipe Ramirez Buitrago, Director Urban Mobility of the World Resource Institute and also former Secretary of Mobility of Bogota and General Manager of Transmilenio before that, so quite a mobility expertise there. And Luis Alberto Meucci, Mexico City Director of the Center for Future Cities at the Monterrey Institute for Technology and Higher Education. And Drew Hallman, the Investment Director of güil Mobility Ventures, which is a corporate venture capital group of the Grupo Kaufman, which is one of the Latin America's largest commercial vehicle dealership groups. So welcome to Riyadh for this conversation on LatAm. Well, you're with a friendly crowd here. Let me tilt a bit here so I can see you. You're with a friendly crowd here, as you know, LatAm is often taken as an example of a successful, some of the best transit systems moving most people in the world. You, Felipe, were the Secretary of Mobility of Bogota, which you told me yesterday moves 85% of movements in Bogota are made by public transport. Is that true? Is that a real statistic?
Yeah, public transport, walking and biking.
Public transport, walking and biking, and so only 15% by car of the rest. And so tell us a bit more of how Bogota, going from, my wife always tells me about when she was a student taking informal transport and fighting to get the bus and understanding where the stop was, to a completely multimodal integrated system with one of the best BRTs in the world in terms of actually movement of people. Electric fleets, cable cars, biking, walking. How did this transition happen, and what were the challenges?
The transition was huge, and it took several years. We're talking more than 25 years when Transmilenio started back in 1999. To make the story short, that was probably the biggest step for the city to transform what was conceived for cars and bring that space back to buses. Was a complete transformation. And then, of course, the success that we had in Bogota in terms of having an operation that was available for everyone, democratizing somehow the public space for people, and making sure that people traveling on these exclusive lanes were moving faster, reducing probably by half the time, was incredible. But then in 2010, another transformation happened again when the informal public transport service started the transformation to become a more formal one. I wouldn't say it was a perfect one. It was quite difficult and with many things that probably can be better, and that's actually great for scaling and showing some examples to other places in the world. And then in 2020, actually, when I was the CEO of Transmilenio, we finished that integration of the system, making that transition from informality to formality. Why that formality was so important? Because just to highlight two main topics there, it's the quality of service that we could bring to people when having just one payment method for everyone and making sure that we had control of what was happening on the streets. That was one very important thing to do. And the other one, in terms of labor, then people who were working more than 16 hours per day or 12 hours per day started having a more formal contract where they started having like 8 hours and so on. So it was a very important transformation, and that happened at the same time while we were, of course, trying to decarbonize the system. We hired 1,485 electric buses. In that moment, made us be the city with the biggest electric fleet in the world outside China. At the same time, we were building the Transmicable, which is the cable car in the city, more cable cars coming in the next years. And nowadays, the city, it's a mess, if I have to say, because it's under construction. But that's important, that we manage, of course, to start, again, advancing and having this construction of more public transport systems so people move better in this public transport system. Just to finish very quick, you say 85% of people move in a public transport system bikes and walking. Not everyone wants to do that.
Okay.
The work of the government is to maintain that 85% up because that's ideal, but in better conditions. So that's why all this infrastructure is needed. We want more infrastructure so that 85% at some point they say, I want to move in these public transport systems. So just to emphasize, that's a great number, but we need to improve more, of course.
Yes, because you know what's very impressive in Bogota is how the whole region is integrated, and in this case, you know, I think the governance frameworks for transport are really important to ensure, you know, that there is this integration. So, Juanita, you were telling me yesterday that how Cali has moved from being, you know, to have a public transport that was really focused on Cali itself, and then now is moving to really a regionally integrated system. The return of rail, I hear as well. Which, you know, how did you move to this framework? How does it allow you to have better transportation also for, you know, neighboring areas like, or, you know, municipalities like Jamundí or Palmira, or integration with the airport? Tell us more about, you know, these government structures.
Thank you, team, and thank you, CoMotion, for having us here, for giving us the opportunity to share with all of you the Cali experience and the region experience. First of all, we have in Colombia 2 decades working in a city model based. We haven't thought about regions. We have been thinking just in cities, in the boundaries of these cities. So what we are changing now is that we are thinking in regions, in the real way that people is moving on, you know? So this is the change that we have been making. The entity that I'm leading right now is a region, the municipalities have been joined and they want to see this area as a region. We have to promote regional transport, to promote regional mobility, and to bring some new capacity, technical capacity for the whole region, because we have the main city, Cali. They have the opportunity to create, to innovate, but the other cities around Cali, they have no capacity. They have the possibility to make the change, to make important change. So this governance make the opportunity or promote the opportunity to them to do specialized transport systems. So that's what we are working on. Recently, in the last 2 national development plans, the national government recognized that we need this kind of authority. This entity is now the authority of the regional transport rail, commuter rail. So we are creating and planning this commuter train for the region. We are going to join Cali with Jamundí at the south of the city, and then with Jumbo at the north, and with Palmira and the airport, as you said. So this is very important for us. We need some partnerships, you know, because we cannot do that alone. We need someone else to work with us.
Yes, you know, looking at big rail infrastructure projects is really complex. How do you ensure you find the right partners? I'm sure public-private partnerships there are key to enable these projects to come up, you know, also looking at financing structures. How do you ensure that this is all smooth? You know, how do you identify your partners? Tell us a bit more about those public-private partnerships.
This is very important for us for 2 main reasons. The first one is because we don't have the whole capacity. We need this partnership with the private sector to give us the capacity, the technical capacity, and especially the innovation capacity. You know, public sector, we are not that in that mood, because we have the day, we have the rush of the day, so we don't have the capacity to innovate. So we need private actors to work with us in that area, and we need to lower the pressure of the finance. We don't have enough funds, you know. We have the funds in future moments, but we need someone to bring the finance for our projects, for the big projects. We have three main projects in our region. The first one is the commuter train that I have told. And we have some hubs for transfer in our region. We don't want that hubs to be just for transfer. We want that to be a tool for capture of value of the land. We want that to be real estate project. We want that to be attractive for the private sector to invest on. And we have Centrarte. Centrarte is the platform that we have created to have data, to have this decision-making information, to lead, to guide the project and the decision well. So in these three projects, we need partnerships from the private sector.
Well, the private sector. So let's turn to you, Drew. You have been, your corporate venture capital group. How can you help cities? How can you help the public sector? What are the innovations coming to LatAm? Tell us a bit more about that. How do you ensure that you can be of service?
Sure. So güil Mobility Ventures, we are corporate venture capital, and our role is to think about the future. So we think about this on a daily basis. I think, building off what Juanita said, I think that the innovation piece of it is really important and can really come from the private sector. So basically what we do is we help Hallman, which is our corporate sponsor, to engage with new products, technologies, and innovations in the mobility space and bring those innovations to LatAm before they would come otherwise, right? And do it with pilots, right? Small pilots, these kind of things. So I think that's a way that the private sector can help the public sector develop. It's really bringing that innovation and engaging in innovation when maybe the public sector can't do it yet.
And can you maybe share some of those pilots and innovations that you've been working on?
Yeah, sure. So we're focused on, we think the future of mobility in LatAm is really going to be three themes. So robotics, autonomous driving, and advanced air mobility. Those are really the three spaces that we're focused on right now. These things take a lot of time, right? These are very long-term things, but they're already happening, right? So if we look at advanced air mobility, there are actually lots of things happening already in inspections, right? So inspecting oil and gas pipelines, forest fire prevention, mining use cases, et cetera. These things are already happening, right? And our role there is to then bring those into other spaces, right? So for example, just a few weeks ago, we invested in a drone delivery company, last mile drone delivery. We'll be bringing them to the region next year to do a pilot. We'll probably do that pilot first in a private space because regulatory-wise, we're still working on that. So we'll probably do the pilot in a private space while we work with the regulators to bring regulation to bear. But I think these are examples of things that, advanced air mobility can have, I think, a huge impact on the region. I think LatAm is ripe for advanced air mobility, given the sort of geographic challenges, some infrastructure challenges as well. And so these are the type of things that can give people access to goods and services that they don't have today. If you think about rural communities, if you think about, if you think about in general, just access to goods and services in a better way. So that's an example. Autonomous driving is already happening in the region as well, just in private spaces, right? So there are autonomous mining trucks operating across the continent. Nobody really hears about them because it's on private land. The ports are starting to bring in autonomous vehicles as well. We're working with a few customers at Hallman to bring autonomous vehicles to logistics yards as well. These are all private spaces, right? So, we're still a long ways off from public road autonomy in the region, but we're starting with these pilots in private areas, and then eventually all of these things will open up to public spaces as well.
Wow, fascinating to see so many things happening already, and it will be interesting to see autonomous vehicles in the streets of LatAm and of the world, really, already here in Riyadh. But let's get back in the ground. Let's go back to those transit corridors. Alberto, we were talking yesterday. You were telling me that in Mexico, around some of those great innovations, BRTs, mobility systems, gondolas, the density is actually lowering, and so a lot of people do not have access to these great solutions.
Right, and we are building massive and costly infrastructure where people are not longer living. We found, and to Drew's and Juanita's point, we also like to give tools through research to generate innovation and to generate partnerships. And this study that we are doing in Mexico, we found 70 cities across the country are losing population in the central areas. So this is massive. If you see the transportation infrastructure, the metros, BRTs, trams in Mexico City, and you see the population around it, you see that the whole site is losing population. So we're bringing these, again, these costly infrastructures to areas with a lower density. For example, Mexico City, the urban footprint of the whole city has lost, 26% of the urban footprint has lost population. In Guadalajara, the second major city, 27%. And in Monterrey, the third largest city, has lost 35%. So this is a key challenge for the cities, and I'm sure that this is going to be a pattern across Latin America.
But just a follow-up question. Is that also, are you seeing less people using the public transit in those core corridors?
Not necessarily yet, but it's gonna be a challenge in the future, lowering the density, because we're seeing people moving to the outskirts. So it's a twofold problem, because the cities are still expanding. Bringing all this transportation to the outskirts is super costly, and where we actually have transportation infrastructure, the population is declining. So, yeah.
That is extremely interesting, and I think that's where integrated governance is so important to look at facing these challenges. Yes, Juanita, I see you.
Yeah, I would like to add something because in Colombia, Regional Transport Authority, we are made also to give some guide to the land development. So that's very important for us because we need that. We need to densify our corridors, our main corridors, So that's the other role that we are doing right now, and it's very exciting because we are organizing the region, and that's important for not having these kind of situations.
Right.
And also, we think that private sector team are there for help us to improve the density. We need to have that kind of partnership. We need that people, we need that company create a real estate project around our corridors. We are not good at that. We don't know how to do that. We have been trying to do that in Colombia for years, and we have some projects, yeah, but I know that with private sector we can be faster. So yeah, I think that's important.
Felipe, tell us, how's it going in Bogota?
No, I was going to actually to even expand a little bit more, because this is such a nice topic, and I think there are two different worlds right now in the world. One, that it's to be urbanized, 2.5 billion people to move to cities mainly in Africa and Asia, and the other one, which is already kind of urbanized, like Latin America, and where we are seeing all this displacement of people. And then housing becomes a big factor here, and how to analyze and connect these two things on planning cities with housing and transport, where people is living, how services are provided, and how people is commuting. And that matters a lot, because it's not only about decarbonizing the system, but also how we reduce the energy consumption in our cities. And when we are living in cities where there are more sprawl, even with having the best transport system possible, and with all cars decarbonized, anyway, we will not be able to get to the to achieve the 1.5 grade centigrades. So it is really important that we get into that conversation sooner than later on how to make sure we connect these services, housing and work, and how people can live in better places so people commute less. We estimate that energy should abate around 25%, but again, it's crazy if you think actually every day we are consuming even more energy because of the way we commute and the way we live in our cities. So to abate that 25% and on the other hand, decarbonize, the work that it's in front of us is huge. And this is not only, of course, Latin America, but the whole world.
Yes, that's, well, on that sober note, but yes, I mean, going back, so, you know, to you, Alberto, just on, to maybe, you know, kind of deep dive on those partnerships that are needed to address these issues, you know. I think, tell us a bit more of what are you looking also at solutions to address these problems?
Looking at what, sorry?
At solutions to address these problems?
I mean, the first solution that we are doing is trying to make pilot projects. We really think that pilot projects, demonstration projects, are key to showing the people, governments, private sector what we can do. For example, in the metro in Mexico City, we're doing right now a study across all the stops, the stations, to identify which are the stations that need more work. Then after that, we invite the private sector, the government, and the community. So we're doing something that we are calling right now private-public community partnerships. We really need to bring in the people that live around those areas. So, and we create a legal entity, we call it technical committee, in which we identify what are the priorities around that station and what should be done in the short, medium, and long term. And all of this is done through data. You know, in my center, we are full of economists, data scientists, urbanists, architects, physics, mathematicians. So we make all these decisions and all these recommendations through data-backed science. So that's the first thing, using data, using science, and using research to try to inform governments, for example, that, as you were saying, sometimes the capacity in governments is limited, right? Or sometimes in the private sector, they can't invest in research. So we try to bring all these stakeholders together to pilot projects and then try to scale them up.
Drew, you know, talking about these partnerships and these pilots, actually, you know, you were talking about some of the pilots that you're deploying around LatAm. How do you get to deploy them? I mean, deploying pilots is extremely hard across the world. As we know, there are a lot of different governance models. So how do you work to ensure that you can deploy them?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that is always a challenge. And the way, sort of, I would break it into two parts, right? So how do we do a pilot with Kaufman, which is our corporate sponsor, and then how do we bring in the public sector to those pilots, right? So I think first, what we try to do is, you know, our role first is to convince Kaufman that this is something that's useful for their business in the future, right? That's going to be a big business for them in the future. So that's our first step. Our first step is internal. And the way we do that is we have essentially a committee, an innovation committee, where we show them, you know, what's the company, what does the company do, what's the business case for this pilot? Like, you know, can this be a $300 million business for the company going forward? So we do a business case, we present that to the committee, and then if that's accepted, we'll work together with Kaufman, with Kaufman's innovation unit, to actually implement it, right? So our role becomes, okay, how do we get the company, let's say a Matternet, which is drone delivery, to come to Chile and actually work with Kaufman to implement this pilot. Then we try to bring in, of course, the public authorities. So in this case, it would be the regulators, the aviation regulators. And with them, what we've pushed for and have done in Chile is the same thing. It's a committee, right? So it's a committee, essentially an advanced air mobility regulation committee, where we're keeping them abreast of, okay, what's happening in the pilot? What are we seeing? What's the data that we're seeing as well? Because they want to see data around how safe is this? you know, what's happening in other regions, and so Matternet can help us with that because they have all the data. They're flying in 4 or 5 countries. They have all the data that can show that this is actually safe, right? And they have FAA approval in the U.S., right? So they can show, hey, this is the FAA approval that I have. This is why they gave us the approval, et cetera. So I think it's from our perspective, from a corporate venture capitalist perspective, that's our role is first we have to show the business case internally, right? And then we bring in the public sector to help, you know, make sure that it can be something viable and scalable as well.
And so the public sector side, how do you bring in those pilots? I think both Juanita and Felipe, and obviously Alberto, you know, you must also have that experience of bringing in together the different parties. So Juanita, do you want to have a first go?
Yes, we in a region we have different conditions around the region. For example, in our region we have Cali, the main city. We have Hallman, is a dormitory town. We have Jumbo industry. We have Palmira with the airport, and each city, each part of the cities, especially in Cali, that is the bigger one, we have different conditions. And if we don't have data to understand that, if we don't have data about the land condition, about the way people is moving around, or what people need in each part of the region, we are not making good decisions for them. So we need that data. We need that partnership, for example, with Academy. We are working right now in Centrarte, the platform that I have told you, with the Academy. We need also not just private sector, but Academy working with us, giving us data, helping us to, not giving, but helping us to have data to make good decisions, understanding the territory. And with that, we can make an integrated regional transport system. Without that, we cannot make it. So now we have in Cali, for example, the MIO is a BRT system, but also with flexible corridors and with a cable car, and they are also planning a new cable cars, understanding the needs of the users. And we are now with the commuter train, but also the commuter train is not going to be in the whole territory, so we need feeders, and that feeders have to be with clean energy, of course, Felipe. And we need bikes, for example, in some areas of our region. We don't have enough space to have ways ways for cars, so we need bike ways. We need different kind of systems that if we don't have data to understand that, to plan that, we're going to do it in a wrong way. So this is why we need it, and we are working on that right now. We are integrated the regional transport with the MIO. MIO is the urban transport in Cali. Now we are integrated that because now we have data of that. So this is one of the examples, yeah.
That's super interesting. If I just quickly
add
there.
Okay,
I think
of
I think that's the data point is super interesting, and there are lots of companies that have already done these things, right? So like a Matternet has flown 50,000 flights, 60,000 flights, and so they have the data on how safe is this really, et cetera, right? There are lots of companies that are already operating autonomous trucks in other regions, and so I think one thing we found in like the private sector's role is, okay, if the private sector can bring these companies, you know, say invest in these companies, bring them to the region, then they'll also bring that data, and that's super valuable for the for the local for the regulators and for the local public authorities.
Felipe?
Yeah, no, I don't have much to add. I think Juanita just did a wonderful answer because what Juanita just did is to explain what, when you are in a government, you have to deal with, and it's reality. And it's how, when you have what's happening in your region, in your specific geography, and how you need to embed things into what's happening there and make sure that it works for that specific situation that is happening. That's exactly what Juanita explained. And I completely agree in terms of data, that's the most important. And then at the institutional level, you have, of course, to make sure you have the political will, which is the first thing. Political will only comes with community pressure, community saying what they need, what they want, and then after you have champions that are able to deliver on the ground that was made as a mandate from political will. And of course, innovation comes there to push and to make sure that things move forward. But definitely, all these things can only be done if you have data. The more we get that data and the more open sources we have in our cities, the better, because then, of course, that innovation will be able to be done. So that's something that I think Colombia has advanced a lot in terms of opening that data to make sure that some other people can analyze it, not only the government analyzing the data, because of course the main source of data is the government. It's almost yeah, it's huge. So that analysis that the privates, the academy and others can do, that makes much better the results to come back to the government afterwards. But definitely that political will, that institutionality that it is to be created, that capacity building within the institutions, and the champions that need to execute these things are absolutely relevant and important in this picture.
Alberto, you've had a lot of experience of building those partnership with both, academy and obviously the public sector and the private sector. What do you think are those enablers? How do you ensure that they're successful? How do you do that?
Well, the first thing is that, at least in Mexico, for something to happen, you need, as we've said, private sector and public sector. But then, for something to last over time, you need something else that we still don't know. Because many of the projects in Mexico are based in political willness, but just on that. And with the new with government transitions, the projects are lost, and this happens in all levels, municipal levels, national levels. So that's why we think in the center that it's key to bring into these legally established committees as many stakeholders as possible, so that they can push the next governments after whatever change, so that they can push the continuity for the projects.
Well, maybe now we've been talking about all these incredible systems, and every time you go to a mobility conference, Colombia, Latin America is praised as an example, despite all the difficulties there are. Yet I must say, Felipe, that sometimes when I go to Bogota and I tell my family-in-law, that I'm going to see the mobility people, they have some complaints. So how do you change, how do you change perceptions? How do you ensure that people are aware of these realities, of the incredible progress that is happening? How do you do that?
It's probably the most difficult part. I have this very nice story of someone who used to work with me in Transmilenio. We were doing some changes in some roads. And then this person, I asked her, how are you doing these days? And she was like, I'm not sure, I feel I'm waking up earlier or doing breakfast faster. It's worth it to say this is a person who normally wakes up at 3 in the morning to commute to Transmilenio, but she wakes up at 3 in the morning because she's a grandmother and she's a mother, so she has to take care of all his family or all her family. So it's a person who really put so much effort into her daily things that she has to do. And then she was telling me, I'm not sure. I think I'm doing much better in terms of time. And then I told her, well, we actually work on the road that you are taking, and those 10, 15 minutes that you're saving are actually because of this road. And she was like, oh, wow, yeah, I had never thought it could have been the transport system, So I always tell this story because it's very interesting how no matter how many efforts we do in the transport systems, people always will think and will see the transport systems as something negative. It doesn't mean it's wrong. That's perfectly fine. But definitely it means that transport is something that we should keep working on. So that reconciliation between the community and the transport system is absolutely important. I think the most important thing, and talking specifically about Bogota, the worst thing that happened to Bogota was almost 12 years of not having anything. Not political will, not projects, not nothing. And when you don't have plans, the city just talks. When the city is stuck, it's like if you have a child with that it's 8 years, and then suddenly he's 18 years, and you want to fit him in the same clothes that when he was 8 years. It will not work. Cities grow, and cities need to keep growing every single time. So the most important thing is to keep working and have projects and advancing to have better systems.
Yes, vision is just so important in ensuring that these plans are implemented and also that people understand them. Juanita, how is it in Cali?
I just wanted to add that we need to improve the way that we communicate with our users. We don't do that well. We are so bad on that. And also, we need to understand that we are not moving just users. We are moving human beings with needs, with different needs. We don't have a user type. There is not, we don't have anywhere a user type. We have different kind of users, and we need to understand them. So we need to have a good effort to improve the effort that what we are doing to understand the human beings that we are moving.
Alberto?
I think those points are great because, Juanita, you were saying before, we were talking about the data gaps. And I think that's a huge gap, the qualitative data. And you just, Felipe, told us a story that we need to get more of those stories, get more of those, how the daily life of the people using the systems. And that's definitely something that we are missing, at least in Mexico, the qualitative data, the stories, the day-to-day, the putting a face in that user type, right?
Yes, that's a really good point. And maybe just to finish, to you, Drew, you know, we're talking about perception, we're talking still about filling some gaps, you know, in transit solutions, and you're talking about advanced air mobility. Why should mayors listen to you? You know, why is it important also to talk about autonomy and AAM and drones?
Yeah, I mean, all of these themes, autonomous driving, advanced air mobility, robotics, they help access to mobility, they help reduce costs, and they help reduce reliability and improve safety, right? So autonomous vehicles are, of course, suffering from less crashes, better fuel economy, typically electric as well. You know, can achieve a much lower cost per kilometer or cost per mile in terms of transportation. Advanced air mobility can bring access to lots of communities, to products and services. So I think these are things that truly help access, help reduce costs, and make things more efficient. And so I think these are extremely important themes. I know that you know, the transportation authorities, the mayors have a lot of things to deal with on a day-to-day basis. But I think these are all topics that can really help improve access to transportation and mobility and costs for the citizenry. So I think they're really important. And they're things that are starting to happen now, right? These aren't necessarily super futuristic. So I think these are very important topics that should be considered, especially when we think about multimodal transportation. I think it's very important.
Well, thank you so much. Our time is up, but a huge thank you to Felipe, Juanita, Alberto, and Drew. Give them a warm round of applause, and thank you so much. And now it's time for a lunch break. So see you soon.